Those of you who got an invite, welcome to Nerd Prom.
No matter where in the world you are, we're all Nerds International. With the hyphen.
Welcome to Veiled Fury Entertainment. I'm your host, ManuFS, and today I'm being joined by Scott W, and we're going to talk about his amazing project, Oubliettes, Sorcery and Reavers. I have no idea how to even pronounce the first word in the title of what he made. Wow, good start to a great show already. So first things first, Veiled Fury Entertainment is part of the Nerds International network. You can find us on Facebook and on Google+. We prefer Google+, because that's where we all hang out. Special shout out today to my fellow co-host from the Wild Die podcast, Eric Lamoureux, or Lamoureux, as I guess he's pronounced in French. He is creating an awesome new Savage World setting called Wiseguys, and he's doing a video diary. So you can find him at his name, Eric Lamoureux, on YouTube. I'm going to put a link in the show notes below this if you're watching this on YouTube, or into chat right now if you're watching live. There is a demo kit going to come out in the next weeks, I believe. You can follow the progress on that on his blog, which is goodbadskinny, all one word, .blogspot.com. Well, so much for the standard, and now for the amazing welcome, Scott, and thank you for joining me here today to talk about that awesome new thing you made.
Much appreciated. Glad to be here. This is going to be fun.
Oh yeah, it is. Short disclaimer for, well, you and basically everyone watching. I am not a D&D person. D&D has never been as big in Germany as it is in, let's say, the United States. So my first actual contact with D&D was playing Horde of the Dragon Queen for D&D 5 about, I think, 3 years ago. So I'm vaguely aware that differences between the editions exist, and that 4th edition did something radically different, which they backpedaled on as fast as they could with D&D 5. So that's about all I know about D&D. And here I am sitting with somebody who made a 20 product. So this is going to be very educational, not only for me, but also for myself. So before we dig into OS+R, tell us a bit about yourself. So who are you, and what do you do when you're not designing pen and paper stuff?
So like you said, my name is Scott, and actually I'm active duty U.S. military. So when I'm not fiddling about with role-playing games and super nerdy things, I'm a senior chief in the Navy. So I'm kept busy 24/7.
Cool. So do your brothers and sisters in arms, do they know about your hobbies, or is it something you keep rather quiet?
So it's weird. Some do, some don't. I've played role-playing games with some odd folks. You know, I know 2 SEALs who play D&D religiously. You know, those are the last human beings on Earth. And then, you know, it's a sine wave. It sort of represents culture, where everyone understands super geekiness. They still want to poo-poo it a little bit. Even I do. I'll take pot shots at some of my younger folks. I'm like, oh, come on, you know, you rolled low for charisma. Let's, you know, get back on task. So little things like that. But yeah, it just depends on who it is and how comfortable I am with them. So
yeah, that I can understand. Probably pretty much the same in every other area of work, be it military, be it civilians.
Yeah.
So
you can't just go around talking about it because no one really knows the lingo, right? So
yeah, so basically it's not that different. Cool.
Yeah, no.
So how did you get into gaming at all?
Ooh, man. When I was like 8 or 9, one of the kids I hung out with, his older brothers, they played the original D&D, the little brown box booklets. And they had begun moving on to first edition, what would be first edition D&D. So they gave us the original D&D because that was the baby stuff. And we fiddled with that. We didn't even have dice because they wouldn't let us use dice. So we had to use a handful of 6-siders. and just figure out like, well, this is close enough to 20 results, so we'll just go with that. And then I don't know, when I was about 10, one of the old crazy ladies that lived down the street from us, she was out in her garden one day and she had found a discarded backpack or, a rucksack full of the, it was a Moldvay, it was the Moldvay edition of Basic Dungeons and Dragons, the box set. She didn't know what to do with it, and she knew we were into weird stuff because we were always running around trying to, pretending to be Robin Hood and all that jazz. And so she gave it to us. So we essentially started playing D&D or, role-playing games full-time over what was, ostensibly a stolen Dungeons and Dragons box set.
Oh man, that is really cool. That's best way to begin playing a rogue.
Yep.
Cool. So, some of my viewers might already be familiar with you as a person because you rose to internet fame, kind of, with the weekly Wednesday Savage Worlds GM Hangout. And now the first, self-made product you're publishing is D20. So, are you switching to the other side, or did you just broaden your horizon?
No, so some folks might know that I did the adventure Ash and Thorns for Savage Worlds, and that actually had to be tamed down a little bit because I go pretty dark in some of my stuff. Which, if you've read the OS+R, you know that. Yeah. So no, it's not really a switch. It's just that Savage Worlds can be kind of a pain to want to develop for or design for, and it seems like there's 1,000 licensees out there. It's just Peg sets their bar a little higher than I was comfortable with doing something on my own for them. I am working on a project that I need to present to them. But yeah, the D20 thing was just, it's so easy because the license is free and you just do whatever the hell you want. And there's 10,000 products out there and there's, 99% are horrible. But you just do it, put it out there and go for it. And since I grew up with D20 since I was, 8 years old, it's real easy to get back into. But no, it's not really my heart. I just wanted to prove that I could do something and that I could. So this is going to sound a little arrogant, I know, but looking at all the OS+R stuff, it's all just sort of a photocopy, one after another, of the basic rules. And what I wanted to do was take the existing template for D20 and shift it into a different mindset, but not go as outside the box as like Dungeon World. But kind of down that path where, hey, we can modernize a little bit of this and how we think about the game. And then that's kind of where I got to with it. Yeah,
that's pretty much what I got from it when I read it 2 or 3 or 4 times.
I don't know if that's good. You're reading it multiple times, or.
Well, as someone who doesn't really know much about D20 systems, there was a lot in it for me as a new person, which I guess is interesting for you too, if somebody who goes at it with fresh eyes, because I don't know shit about D20. So I read it multiple times to just really get into it and to see, okay, maybe I missed something when I read through it the first time. Maybe I didn't understand something really. And I tried to get a test run together, but I didn't have the time, and some friends didn't have time, sadly. Planning to remedy that in the near future because it's really interesting.
Cool.
So yeah, but yeah, that's pretty much the idea I got from reading it. Like, there's a lot of stuff in there taken from more modern systems and neatly integrated it into a D20 system. So it was really interesting to read for me as well. So how long did it take you to find the correct words to make it abbreviate OS+R?
So I'm a bit of a language nerd, and actually not really that long. I originally had the system when it used to be, before this, it was just another lame vanilla retro clone, and I called it Scimitars and Sorcery. And I was just like, okay, well, cool, that's kind of boring. And then I sat there and I was like, you know what, I want to have a play on the word OS+R. Mostly to sort of put a thorn in people's side because I knew it would bother some of the community that I was, defiling the Madonna of terms. But yeah, really, once I looked, I've always knew what an oubliette was because D&D was part of my early education for crazy words. thinks of Gygax. And so I was just like, who, OS+R, what would I call it? Oh, yeah, an oubliette, cool. And actually, Reavers was the word that took the longest to get to, because I was like, damn, how do I encapsulate sort of the feeling of this savage, brutal game?
And I actually, well, oubliette, I had to look up.
You're not alone.
I had
Most
never...
people.
Seriously? Even the English-speaking people?
Even the English speaking, it's the obscure French term. And we went to a con. We had people who came to the tables and they sat and their first thing was like, "Hey, like for real, how do you pronounce that word? What the hell does it mean?" And I was just like, "It's an oubliette." My first instinct internally is like, "Have you never seen the movie Legend or Labyrinth?" Right, with David Bowie. It was like, he literally says the word. But that's that deep nerd culture, and I mean, it's not a good movie.
I actually have seen the movie. I like the movie, but it's been like 20 years I've seen it. And
Yes. Yeah, that was just one of those words that sticks out. I was like, oubliette. And I was, like I said, I'm a nerdy kid, so I'm like, I run to the dictionary whenever I see something I don't understand.
Cool. Yeah, well, and Reavers is a kind of ambiguous word in that context, because it can also... Mostly Reavers is a word that refers to the bad guys. Cue Firefly theme. But also, I believe literally translated, it's just somebody who plunders. And that's basically the gist of every D&D group ever. Go into the dungeon, whack the goblin, get the treasure.
All facts. Yeah, Murder Hobo Central.
So yeah, that ties together very neatly.
Thank
Cool.
you.
So yeah, how long have you been actually working on that before you got to a stage where you were like, okay, I can actually publish it?
Oh, so I want to say it was 2012, 2013. I was sort of fiddling with it. And like I said, it was really vanilla, and it really was vanilla. Like the greatest thing I had done was like, "Oh, I'll make it a 3d6 versus a d20 game. That'll really shake things up," in addition to everything else that does it. And then I let it lie. We had a personal tragedy in our family, and that sort of just set everything to the back burner. And then I was trying to really get in with the Savage Worlds scene and publish for them, and I did a few things, and I kept starting little projects. And it was early last year, I was laying on my couch at like 5:30, 6 in the morning, and Max Landis. I really love Max Landis. I think he's a very creative human being. I know he's gotten in some trouble. I don't really care. It doesn't derail from he's one of those crazy geniuses. And he made a video on YouTube, on his YouTube channel, and the video was about eating your ashes. And it was him walking through Hollywood, a Hollywood studio, onto a sound set, simply to prove that all of your crazy ideas, it doesn't matter how bad or how good they are if no one knows about them. So stop being lazy and eat your ashes, in order to grow. And I tell you what, man, like by 6:30, I was hammering away, and I was 40 pages into what had become OS+R. I changed everything. I started making notes on all the things that I didn't like about D20. And so from, say, like late spring of 2017 until we pulled the trigger on the Kickstarter in November was how long it took to put the game together.
That is quite some time. So what made you decide to put it out as a Kickstarter?
Stupidity. Well, we just saw it, and I didn't want to like some of the books you see have the standard stock art, and I know we used a lot of art off of Drive-Thru, but what I mean is like they'll use the historical art because it's free, it's National Archive stuff. But I found a bunch of art, and I started bookmarking it, and I was just like, you know what? I really want to deliver like art that feeds into the theme of what I want. And I kept finding more and more. And I talked to the buddy of mine, Charles, and I was like, dude, we'll just kickstart it. We won't ask for a lot. We'll just ask for enough to cover, these crazy art costs, because art can be really expensive, which is fine. They deserve their pay. And that really was the Kickstarter, was just to pay for that. And then since Carl Kiesler does the layout, I had talked to him and begged him like, hey, would you be willing to take some money? Because we're about to have a little bit of free money laying around. So I gladly paid him for his professional layout, which is the end result of what you got in the book.
Yeah, Kiesler does amazing. He also designed the character sheet, if I'm not mistaken.
He did. He designed the initial character sheet, which was phenomenal. And he gave me all the files, and I was working through and learning InDesign. So he was also a mentor for the lunacy that is an Adobe product at that level of just, it's not just a word processor where you're hammering it out. So I did my best and gave it to him. But yeah, and then once we got everything in hand, I would make some changes or design theory layout and ask him for advice, and he'd get the thumbs up. But yeah, that was pretty much it. Yeah, he was instrumental in getting the product to look like what it looks like. There's no way in hell I would have done it.
Yeah, layout can be a very interesting topic. There's Richard Woolcock did quite a few blog posts about layout he did for his own products, and at this point, I'm pretty sure at this point he could be taking money to do layout for other people if he had the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he went on a hell of a learning curve, and yeah, it shows.
So yeah, but because I'm friends with him, he lives in Munich also. We talk a lot, so I got a lot of the process, got to view a lot of the process live. So yeah, I feel your pain with trying to learn how to lay out a document that is, oh my god.
Yeah, and it's just crazy because the littlest things make a huge difference in layout and just capturing the human emotion and making someone want to keep turning a page or to go back to something. And yeah, hats off to layout graphic designers around the world. That's insane.
Yes, that absolutely is an underappreciated art form. So, where are we on my funny list of questions? Well, we technically already covered some the interesting facts and stories about how OS+R came to be. So let's go with it in a bit of different direction. From the playtest, was there something you put in where you thought, oh, this is going to be absolutely amazing, and then you playtested it and it was just a train wreck?
Oh, man, well, what was, man, I'm trying to think of some of the things that we went through. I think the magic system came full circle because the first feedback was whoever made this game hates mages. I was like, no, I don't hate mages. I just want I just want you to feel when you play a mage that you're actually playing someone who's tapping into the darker nature of the reality. So that one we changed to where, okay, well, maybe it doesn't not so harmful. Maybe it's not harmful at all. Maybe a little bit harmful. And we're right back to like, you know what? You're the one making the damn choice to play the wizard. You're the one who wants to tap into energies. And kind of in the theme of the game is that it's all about player choice of how you want to play your character and what you want to do. And it was, it's like, no one's making you cast Arcane Strike. You can play a wizard or a mage who only casts, light weave spells and be done with that. I'm not twisting your arm to make you cast the bad spells, and so. But I think that's the biggest one that went through a bunch of iterations and got the most feedback. And I mean, that was only a couple of people, mostly people who played mages or those who were like cons or the various groups, and they just loved it because they're like, this is ridiculously brutal. But when I feel like I'm casting a spell, I feel like it matters choices that I'm making, and that's what we wanted to capture with that particular point.
Yeah. Not like the original D&D where basically the only choice you make is, okay, when I level up, do I really take Fireball or maybe go for something else? And here it really is, it goes down to your very essence. So yeah. We need to bring this guy down. I have a spell for that, but well, maybe that's going to be a double kill. Who knows?
Right? Yeah, I'm also the only healer, so.
Yeah, right. Because there's no priest class in there.
There is no priest class. Again, it's just we use the generic term of mage from like the Persian Zoroastrian side of the house, where the Magi were the priest mages, and they were known for, they had the religious side, they understood the greater cosmology of things, and that's what we wanted to go for with that. I'm trying to think of anything else that was a design element. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. If you can think of something right now, then cool.
No. Yeah, honestly, most things stuck the way they were. There were some changes, like the using favor. The halfling went through some changes, which I know you want to talk about that a little bit later.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, that's the one that catches a lot of eyes, and people are like, "Oh," but no, the game mostly is intact from the design element. I mean, we had some pushback on why did you get rid of ability scores? It's like
Yeah.
no one uses them for anything. No, that they don't matter, except in some older games where they do matter. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah, well, they give you the possibility to introduce basically what I like to call throwaway items, where you give somebody an item that just gives him +1 to strength. And if he's
Right.
really lucky, that pushes him over the threshold, so he gets a better ability score. But overall, it's just something to keep people interested, and it's not really that much of a bonus overall.
Exactly. It's just placation through, obfuscation is really what it comes down to.
Yeah, so and with a system like you did, where you just have the ability scores, if you give out an item that gives a bonus, it is going to matter. So
Oh
everything
yeah,
feels like it really has worth, because everything will have worth. You give out in that direction. There are no filler items that are just, yeah, well, it's kind of nice, but I'm gonna switch it out for the gauntlet of +2 strength as soon as I can get my hands on it.
yeah, sure. The will and the attributes we took some with few beatings for that. Well, because I plant my flag and make some, not really, arrogance not a good word, but I make challenges to people and they don't like it. But we can get into that on the later down.
Yeah. Well, it is an established system with a few decades of history. So if you change something that feels fundamental to most of the fans, yeah, that's going to
Yeah.
create some backlash. But backlash doesn't always have to be a bad thing.
No, not at all. Oh, you know what we did? We used to call it armor class, and there was a player, much to the chagrin of everyone else. His take was if armor doesn't actually affect how hard you are to hit, why call it armor class? And I took that for a second. I'm like, no, you're absolutely right. I don't have to follow those guidelines. And so that was a playtest item that we had in place for the entire time, and then it changed the last minute to defense because he was absolutely correct. Semantics sometimes can matter, and so I was like, "Pfft," and my own editor fought me on that one.
Wow, interesting. Because
Yeah,
now that you tell that story, that absolutely makes sense to me. Because if it doesn't work like armor class, why call it armor?
yeah,
It's going to irk people way more that they see what they know. A distinction that says armor class. Oh, cool! It's armor class. I know how armor class works, and it works completely different. Damn it! What the
yeah,
fuck?
yeah, and gamers are in no way pedantic nitpickies.
No, we are the most open-minded species on this bloody planet. Especially if it comes to our bread and butter home systems we've been playing for 20 years. Oh
Oh
man,
man.
cool. So yeah, I guess I'm going to jump a bit in
Oh, you
in the document, but yeah, since we have already touched classes, so yeah, you said the mages are based more on the ancient magi, where it cover a lot of ground, which makes for the absent priests, because a mage can just say, yeah, I'm going to specialize on the light weave and
Mhm.
basically be a priest in all but name. Fuck it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, yeah, you can join one of the mystery cults. The mages get one weapon of their choice to be proficient with, and so again, it really does come down to that player decision. The GM is just there to arbitrate what you all want to do as a team, and if you want to be someone who doesn't have any fell weave spells, that's awesome. Now you're spending your advancements on wearing armor and all that jazz and picking up those light spells or combat abilities. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could absolutely make kind of a warrior priest who just uh,
Yep.
dresses in a leather armor and has a sword and is, yeah, front row and center in the battle.
Yep.
Which is
Yep.
which is one of the aspects when I read through it, I was like, damn, that's really nice. That's a cool way to make that class very flexible in what you actually want to do with it, which brought me to another thought that because there are no subclasses for mages because they actually don't need subclasses. Just the way they
Nope.
work is the way you can take them in any direction. Why no subclasses for jacks?
So Jack, and I love these questions because these are actually like two of the like this moment is also one of those points where people were just on fire about. So for the Jack is the same way. When you look at it, the Jack only has a handful of set abilities that all Jacks have because it's based in you're a miscreant. So here are the things miscreants are good at. But when you look at the Jack's talents, which are essentially thief skills, I don't tell you which ones are more important because you have all of them, but the player gets to choose 4 that are most important to them and actually elevate their expertise dice in those, right? Which is telling the GM, here are the things I'm interested in. It's not climbing walls and finding traps. I am more interested in poisons and deciphering and whatever else. And that goes along with the Jack is also the only character class that doesn't have its primary attributes for expertise assigned to it. Those 2 attributes are complete player choice, and you can choose any of the 6 to have as your expertise as a Jack character.
So it's the same idea with the as with the mage, except with spells. You just choose abilities and your attributes to focus on the direction you want to take your rogue, your scoundrel.
Yep. Yeah, and same thing for the weapons of a Jack. They have they can, any class can use any weapon, but there are problems with that. But yeah, they also can specialize their weaponries. Like, okay, well, cool, I'm going to be a close-in fighter, so I'm going to use these weapons because my attributes actually affect those weapons. And we'll get into that. It's one of the first things people also notice is that the attributes affect combat a little bit different than you're used to in a standard D20 game. And then the converse of this is, when we explain this, then the question is, well, a Myrmidon is nothing but a fighter who fights really well. I'm like, okay, well, what is a paladin then? Because it's not just a fighter who happens to cast, lay on hands. And so I always thought the warrior class was disenfranchised, if you will, in most role-playing games. So we wanted to break the warrior down specifically into, look, combat training and combat specialization is a real thing, and it's vastly different. And to encapsulate all the choices that the warrior disciplines have in the game, it would have, the warrior would have been 8 pages long, and just choices anyway. So, yeah, we just figured, look, we'll just give you disciplines as a warrior, and this allows you to drill into how you fight. And, in the instance of the paladin, how you believe and help you foment how you're going to role play. Which actually the paladin also, the lay on hands of the paladin actually was a thing, and we got into a little bit of a tiff over some people for, because most players are used to just being able to do whatever the hell they want. And I'm going to profess to be a lawful good paladin, but then I'm going to heal the necromancer who, rapes goats and shit at night, and there's no consequences for it. Well, not in this system. Your choices and your actions have consequences. And yeah, so that's why we did it the way we did it. And I personally just felt that there was too much variety for the warriors. So we went the discipline route. And then I felt that the Jack and the Mage are such crazily malleable and tunable characters that usually you see the Jack and the Mage played by the people who want to tinker. And so I wanted to create 2 classes that would allow those individuals to tinker with it however they wanted. And most people who play warriors, it's not that they don't tinker, but they're just laser focused on how they tinker. And so that's really how the 3 classes were born.
Cool. So what was the idea behind integrating the ranger into the warrior class?
So kind of personally how I grew up in the mountains of Arizona. Yes, we have mountains. If you don't know, we got really big mountains. They're called the Rockies, and it sort of dips off in a spur in the north. But I grew up hunting and all that jazz. And growing up with I grew up near reservations with Apaches and Navajo. And so part of growing up in Arizona and the Southwest in general, you get educated, with Native American culture, Native American stories. And so then you look at something like Last of the Mohicans, not just the book, but the movie. It clearly shows like they're warriors, but they can also track you down, and they're going to find and finish you. Sort of the theme of Roger's Rangers also coming up in American Revolution. They were warriors, but they were warriors who used subterfuge and misdirection and, what now is covert black operations against the Brits. And so I never liked the Ranger using spells. I thought that was a little weird, even growing up. So we just pulled it in and said, look, you're the warrior who his discipline is now you're out there finding bad folks. You're finding however you frame it, that's what you're doing. You're the hunter gatherer for the tribe, the advanced scout, however you kind of frame it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense, and that gives that entry a very different context than what had been brewing in my mind when I read it. But now with the context of Native American, wow, that's awesome.
So when you first read the Ranger, what were you thinking about it?
I thought it was a bit strange that it wasn't its own class, because it breaks with the kind of, in lack of a better word, with the narrative of the other warrior classes, because they are in there to hit things. The paladin is going to hit things and then heal his own his friends, and is going to be a bit more of a spiritually guided warrior. But at the end of the day, he's going to push the sharp end of the sword into something that's evil.
Yeah.
So, and then there was the ranger, who is, well, okay, ranged combat, cool, works within all that, but also with Beastmaster and tracking and all the nature law and everything, it felt like a bit of a hybrid between a warrior and, say, something of a druid class, just without the spells. That was kind of the feeling I got from it. I was like, this is interesting, and I think I don't really understand the idea behind it fully. That was one of the things I thought, okay, that's probably something that's going to get clearer if I actually sit down and play. But now the context with Native American commandos, damn! Wow. I did not see that coming. Just like nobody saw them coming.
Yeah, all facts.
Nice. So, well, that covers classes. Let's go over to races. The elves already mentioned their kind of fey nature, and well, they basically are from another plane of existence, where they are courts that seem like to be based in the fey lore of all those of summer court, the winter court. So, was that your primary idea behind elves, to just make them not part of the actual world, but somebody who basically immigrated and, well, now is kind of stuck?
Yes, absolutely. The original thought I had and so one of the things that I gloss over was, and people have mentioned this, is that this is like it's a framework book, but I sprinkled in a lot of the campaign world that I've been using for every system I've ever played. And so that's where some of these choices are coming into. And I tried to limit it just because I was like, but it's really hard to write a game book without basically telling someone, like, here's how the elves of this universe work, and try to be very generic. But yeah, I'd always wanted the elves to sort of represent that outsiders, you don't really belong, but you were instrumental in essentially saving existence for the mortal races, because and I wanted the elves also to have that role-playing moment when if you're really into the elves and you say, hey, look, I get it, but my people, we sacrificed immortality. Essentially we sacrificed living in our heaven to come here to intercede on behalf of order, right? To stave that off. We definitely wanted the elves to have that like uber fey, if you will, that they represent the sum total of what it means to be fey. We used to they had we took a cue from Dungeon Crawl Classics, and we actually were looking at using the cold iron will harm them. And that was a step too far in, not plagiarism, but it was like, it's kind of been there, done that. So what else could we implement? And so we figured a different way around them to make them mechanically say, look, we want you to remember you're not part of this world, and the nature of this world will remind you in some ways sometimes that you don't belong here.
Yeah, and that you and for role playing opportunities also that you can never go home.
Yeah, right. And that's their their ability to do those short teleports, and it's very clear in there is like, yeah, you'll use it, but it's not just a mechanical combat advantage where it's like, okay, well, I do my mini teleport for 30 feet and then I go back to fighting. And it's like, oh no, we're gonna have a conversation about the half a second that it takes the world to witness you go from one spot to another. But in between that time is an indeterminate amount of time that you reopen a door to your home world, and it tugs at those heartstrings in your soul, and you want to stay, but you're never going to be allowed to stay. And so then you reappear back on the mortal plane, and that's why there's there isn't a mechanical effect for taking that action.
Yep. Small.
And hopefully, yeah, and people hopefully we're hoping that a lot of this stuff isn't to be dicks. A lot of it is to help like facilitate those conversations at the table and to help people role play. I have played. Oh man, I play a lot of sessions with elves in almost every game, and I've never seen an elf use their ability yet.
Wow.
Not ever. I've never seen it, and it was never because it was not mechanically advantageous for them. It would have been in many instances for them to get behind the enemy. I simply have been exposed to people who read it, and you see the lights go on, and they've got yelled at the table by the actual players. It was like, why the fuck wouldn't you teleport behind them and help us? And the players are like, yeah, it's a deeper spiritual thing than just me helping out kill some bad guys. Like, so I'm not using this until I think it's a last choice effort that I have to have.
Yeah. I'm not going to put myself through that pain just for another dead goblin.
Yep.
That is really cool. Well, speaking of somebody who has a bit of a problem in the world, the concept for halflings. What the hell?
So one of my favorite settings of all time is Dragonlance. The original Dragonlance. I think the Kender were very cool, and everyone plays a halfling like a Kender. And okay, well, 99% of gamers are gonna make it a Kender. Also, 99% of gamers are never gonna be a halfling warrior or a halfling mage. They're gonna be a halfling rogue or a halfling thief or some nefarious little type. And so we're like, cool, let's take the halflings. I want gypsies in the game, but not as a human race. So how do we make the concept of gypsies with everything, right? The misunderstanding, the misapplication, it's a little bit of truth of what they do, right? I mean, sometimes stereotypes are true at a broad sense. So like, how do you pull all those things together and make it a more interesting race to play? And so we're like, you know what's cool is there are systems out there where halflings can inspire or do whatever. But I was like, what if the halflings had this very powerful tool at the table, which is providing, favor to someone, which is incredibly potent in the game, right? Our favor is a little more powerful than even Benny's for the Savage Worlds players. There's no limit on what you can do with favor. It's a ton of, you can even tell the GM to, nope, I don't think so. Reroll that roll against the fighter. Reroll that damage against our fighter. No, that never happened. And we realized, hey, that's pretty potent. So let's take the idea of a halfling being a cursed race and why they're cursed. And there's a little bit of a backstory to it in my head. So for me, from my world, it's because the halflings weren't always halflings. They were a human tribe who abandoned their humanity and sought deeper and darker secrets. And so they were twisted into the halflings, like the Trogul were, at one time related to the dwarves, and they ended up in a different path. And so we want to take that. And yeah, when some people read him, so we're like, okay, cool. So when the halfling grants favor, they need to pick a victim who's going to have some misfortune now. And then we pushed that together with, all right, so no one likes, right, in game terms, usually the gypsy thing, right? And like, oh, gypsies are here to steal us. Like, so what would make the gypsy traveling and all that go down really well? I was like, great, cool. How about we make it to where if a halfling sticks around for longer than 30 days in one civilized location, the things begin to turn against them, and so those myths and stereotypes slowly become real. because there's a curse placed upon them. So that's how we blended everything together to create the halflings as they currently stand.
And you never, you don't go into detail in any way whatsoever what the curse is. So players can just
Nope.
mold that to their own campaigns, and
Yep.
they could actually build an entire campaign just around what the hell happened to the halflings.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
That is really cool. So dwarves. Yeah, I have I had some interesting thoughts about the dwarves, but the most interesting was how the fuck do you pronounce the in-game word for dwarf?
Twerg is how I would say it. Twerg and Twergum.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of the vocabulary that's used that you might see like Dala and Twerg and Ilif. When I was in university, I studied. Well, I've always studied languages, and I got into Indo-European studies at some point, coupled with my anthropology. And so a lot of the things you're seeing are my very amateurish take on, you know, vowel stem changes, consonantal glides of actual Proto-Indo-European terms as best reconstructed. And so that's what really all the things you see are based on an Indo-European, a Proto-Indo-European mindset of this vocabulary and how the mystery cults look. And once people hear that and they start, if you get into it, you're like, oh shit, now the mystery cults make complete sense. Now magic makes complete sense. The dwarves and the elves make complete sense because it's drawing on that wide spread of Germanic myth, Proto-Iranian myth, Hindu myth, right? As you start wheeling down it. So yeah, it's a long explanation for a really weird word. I actually didn't want to put I didn't want to put any of the weird names in the game at all, but the feedback started to roll in. It was like, oh my god, no, what about the Etani were probably the most popular race because I don't know why. I don't know if there's never been a giant. I mean, there has been a giant race playable in D&D. So I don't know what it was about it, but man, people took to that like nobody's business. Every convention, every game table, there's always an Etani. They always want to play. They always want to talk about it. They always do the haughty, I am superior than thou. My race is older. I mean, the players fall right into line with that race. So when I talked about taking all the weird verbiage out, it was my editor said, "Don't you dare!" And then a lot of players were like, "No, don't take it out because it's very cool and it's different."
Yeah, and you don't swamp the whole book with it, just like some other products do, where they just invent a new word for everything, and it makes the whole book very hard to read. And at the table, everybody's just going to be like, "What are you going to play?" "I'm going to be the dwarf," because at that point, nobody even gives a fuck what the dwarf is called in game, because they've been so swamped and overwhelmed with new words that don't make sense at all. So I think in OS+R it's just the right amount of sprinkling on the top with race names that make them interesting, and then everything else is words and can work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. So the dwarfs, they still dig, but they don't dig deep. That was an interesting concept for me to discover. Is that something you want to leave to the players or the actual GMs, or does it have something to do with their god that dwells below?
So a little bit of both, right? Like everything with the system is written is like, look, man, I'm not here to tell you how to play the game, and I know there are some people who really hate that. They hate the intro, and when I say that in the intro, I was like, I'm not here to answer questions. I'll answer them, but it's mostly I'm not being a dick. But don't ask the questions because it's your table. I don't know what your players are into. I don't know anything about you, and so embrace it and run with it. But the dwarfs, the initial inspiration I have of the dwarves is I lived in Jordan for a little while, and if you've ever been to Petra. Right, if you've seen Indiana Jones and they go through the canyon, that's in Petra, and they open up to one of the temples. Actually, it was I think it was a treasury repository. I can't really remember. But then the Nabatean culture, they built all those buildings into the cliff faces, and I remember exploring Petra and just kind of hiking around. And was like, this is really fucking cool. Like a culture that they didn't go in deep into the mountains, but they went deep enough to defend themselves and to create these beautiful edifices and it was very inspiring. And so I wrapped that up and was like, man, what if the dwarves didn't just live in the ground and have dark vision? And what if they were created as a slave race for a completely powerful empire and didn't give them dark vision, because that's the last thing you want is your slaves to be running around in the damn dark where you can't see unless you use magic, right? So you want to be able to track them and trail them by their lanterns or whatever else they're using. And so it's sort of and all those key pieces started falling into place. And and that's really where the dwarves are and why they're like they are, is essentially, me standing in the middle of Petra at 120-degree heat, in 20 years ago.
That's a long time to make something out of an idea. Wow, that's
Yes.
got to be a record for instances of that happening. I know. So going back to character creation or characters in general, there is no talent list. There are some ideas for it when you create a jack, because a jack gets a higher expertise die for you can choose to mold him into the kind of jack you want to be, but there is no overall list for that. So is that just so people are just you're just saying them, if you take the advance to get expertise in a talent, you just make that up?
Yeah, it can be something that you can really create on the fly that makes sense for your character, that makes sense for how you've played. Or for the jacks, I'm increasing the expertise dice for a literal specific talent. Again, we want to be as loose as possible and be like, look, you know your players better than anyone else does, and you know their whims and their desires, and you're the player, the direction you want to take your character. Maybe you don't want a standard like a warrior. The last game I ran, I had a person play a Myrmidon, but he played an MMC, MMA type Myrmidon, where he fought bare knuckles and eschewed weapons and didn't really he had a shield on his back, but he beat people to death. And for him, it was, he's like, well, the talent thing, we're talking about it. He's like, well, how much damage did my fist do? And I told him, well, your fists do the damage that you do. It's a class. And a lot of people had a hard time with that, because 40 years of D&D telling you that a fist can't kill you, which is a lie, is ingrained in people. And argument in a debate sense of me convincing him was like, look, man, I could take any one of you at the table right now and throw you into a fucking guillotine holes and make you tap the fuck out, or just continue to strangle you until you're dead. And I was like, who do you want to be hit in the face by, me or Mike Tyson, right? Because Mike Tyson is probably going to kill most human beings when he hits them. If he hits them just right and hard enough, things can happen. And so that's what we wanted to convey. And it's the weapons and all that jazz. The damage really people have a hard time with that. And they're like, well, the sword does the damage. I said, no, I'm trained to the point where I can take a paring knife, right? And there's only 4 inches between open air and your heart no longer needing to beat. So I don't need a 4-foot broadsword. I don't need a battle axe. Weapons were designed for specific purposes, not just to kill. They were designed to penetrate and to get through and to take care of other problems that technology also did. But realistically, if I get to you and close enough to you, I can hurt you with my bare hands. I can stab you with, a 4-inch paring knife and puncture your heart. One of my uncles was a ranger in Vietnam. And one of the training things they went through is how to take your bare hand and ram it up underneath in the soft belly tissue of someone and latch on with your fingertips to a rib, the lower rib, and pull and just snap those ribs, right? So human beings are incredibly soft and delicate.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot to kill us, right? So
yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And also it just takes a lot of the I can only afford a short sword at character creation, so the next thing I'm going to do with my warrior is rob somebody who has a long sword, so I can upgrade my damage, and it just takes that bullshit right out, because I am trained to kill. I can do that whichever the fuck way.
Absolutely. It's like, well, how come the mages don't waste time on this shit? Yeah, they get weapons. But I'm not telling you, I didn't say you were good at it. It's just a weapon you choose. And if you take your advancement and make your weapon better, awesome. Great for you. That's what you want to do. You're happy with it. But in general, and the jacks are very specific killing machines. They can do a lot of damage to a single individual target.
Yeah, burst damage.
Yeah.
Cool.
And in the weapons too.
Mm.
When you look at the chart, the weapons do damage based on class, but each weapon, that was a really difficult design factor, was to like, okay, well, if I can do damage with the same damage with everything, why the hell would I choose an axe over a sword? I think most people, whether or not they know they do this, it's all aesthetics. There are players who will never touch a battle axe because they think it's the stupidest looking weapon in the game, right?
Yeah.
I always want to have a sword, and there's something visceral, and there is something Jungian about some of these weapons. And so you see that, but I'm like, okay, well, cool. Well, I need an excuse as to why you would take an axe, maybe, versus why you would take that sword. And so we that's how we did the weapons table the way we did, and added those key little pieces to them.
Yeah, so basically to make the warrior or fighting types choose the right tool for the job at hand.
Fact. And then, couple that to our inventory system, and then you just see a lot of like, fuck my life at the table. They realize like, hell, I don't get to carry all the weapons I want. There are limitations to a human being.
Oh man, the inventory system. That was also something I looked over and I'm like, this looks familiar, and I couldn't place my finger on it. And then,
Yeah.
funny, 2 days ago, I found out where I'd seen it before. It was a house rule
Yep.
somebody made for Savage Worlds. And
So
that's
it's an
where I learned.
OSR. It's called the anti-hammer space tracking.
But that is from some original OSR product.
Yeah, original OSR, and there's like 500 iterations of it. And so I was like, well, cool. I like this idea. It's the coolest encumbrance system I saw ever. So I was like, all right, fuck it. I'll just take it. We're going to make it a little bit of our own, and we put the twist that we did on it. And there you go. And you get to either draw your shit in there, or I draw pictures just because I'm like, I got a cool scimitar, I got a dagger, I got a bow. And when you're really drawing the pictures, you're like, oh, I'm so fucked. I have 3 boxes left before I'm encumbered.
Yeah, that also gives an option for people to create really amazing props for the table, because it's really easy to just take the picture, take a really fancy picture of a bow, print it out, cut it, and then people have shit they can actually lay on their character sheet.
Yeah.
How much they are packing at the moment, which I thought was a really cool aspect of that whole sort of inventory. Sweet. So, circling back a bit to something, to
Sure.
the spell system. At first glance, it looks really brutal, and then the more you get into the details to it, you realize, okay, this is something that's going to punish me if I'm stupid, which
Yes.
is always a good aspect to have at the table. So, is it that way because the worlds you create for yourself are more on the grim and dark side, or is that something you did because you wanted the mage to actually feel the pain of being stupid with meddling with powers you don't fully understand?
Oh man, again, a little column A, a little column B. Again, a little bit of an arrogant statement, but I think magic in most games is just boring. I cast Magic Missile, awesome. Savage Worlds is probably the first game, and then now Genesis, where it's just like, okay, well, we'll have a conversation real quick about what that magic looks like to make it ownership. But they're still like, okay, cool. I'm just casting spells willy nilly, and here's how I do it, and I may fail or I may, get tired. But yeah, I wanted people when they play the mage, like I said, to really feel like, fuck, man, I'm making some hard ass choices right now, and I hope one of you has a goddamn healing potion or the healing herbs in hand, because I'm about to go full, Last Starfighter Death Blossom in this room, and then I'm going to engage in the initiative rolls with on my way to the Deathlands, because I need to fight for my soul. But yeah, we wanted magic to be just consequential, and again, it was one of those things where we wanted to have player choices have consequences, and not to be dicks, but to make people really think about, I know I'm guilty of bagging on, immersion at the table, as everyone who's ever read anything about me knows, but this is my attempt to help facilitate immersion at the table. Like, you want to talk about immersion? Awesome. Let's talk about, are you going to kill yourself? Are you willing to die for the betterment of your fellows?
Yeah.
That's the question. And then with the magic systems, what the whole game is, the attributes. one of the things that I said that I challenge people with, and they try to break the system. I hate power games. I'm not a min-maxer. I hate munchkins with all my heart. I do believe you're playing games wrong when you do that shit. But I understand a lot of systems force you to do that, right? You don't have a choice, because if you don't play the optimized character version, then you're ruining the fun for everyone else because you're going to just suck at shit. But with the attributes, and I don't know, in my heart, we got it across, is that I tell people, and the spell system really shows this, is that there are no dump stats in this system. You will make hard choices from the very beginning because you need to determine how you want to play your character. Charisma is not a dump stat. If you believe that, you are fucked from the beginning. Wisdom is not a dump stat. Intelligence is not a dump stat for warriors. And with warriors, you see that. If you really take a look at it, all warriors have strength for their expertise, but each of the disciplines represents one of the attributes, right? Yeah. So, and that's really where the spellcasting sort of bled into that. Look, great. Intelligence determines how many spells you get or how many spells you know. Awesome. Charisma tells us how well you can cast the spells. Some spells, it requires your wisdom and your constitution in order to keep those spells going or actually make those spells matter. So you tell me, Mage. It's all about, personal choices.
Yeah, what kind of mage do you want to be? Is that a kind of lesson you took away from Savage Worlds? Because in Savage Worlds, making smarts your dump stat is, combat-wise, it's a really bad idea, and in some other respects of the game, it's a really bad idea. Or is that just something that came from the process of, let's take the stuff in D&D I don't like and make it better?
Yeah, I'm going to have to admit, it was basically, let's take all this dumb shit in D&D that I can't stand and find a way of getting around all of these, the complaints and the whines and the I'm so clever because I made a first level kobold sorcerer who, can't be touched. Shit. But in Richard Woolcock, I want to say it was him who wrote, it was Richard, I think, who wrote, here's what all the attributes in Savage Worlds do. Right? That was him, if I remember correctly, I think.
I think so, not sure, but yeah, guess it was probably him.
It was probably him, right? And so I took that, and I actually have that as a handout when I get players at the table, especially new players. I'm like, so let's talk about how there are no dump stats in Savage Worlds. And I know Savage Worlds like super gurus who believe there are dump stats in Savage Worlds based on how you play. And I'm like, you're a fucking fool, because there's not. And so Savage Worlds did help bolster my ego about it. But yeah, it really was just an attempt to just slap D&D in the face a little bit and be like, stop fucking around. Make everything matter in the game.
So is that also what inspired the expertise die? Because in classic D&D, you have your talents or something, and they give a flat bonus. And you just completely did away with that, and you say you have expertise in something, and that gives you a bonus die. So maybe your role. So it's basically a bit more of having to rely on the roll. So maybe it's going to help you, maybe it's going to absolutely fuck you over.
Because most times in D&D, your flat bonus is proficiency, right, is really what expertise kind of represents and models. Yeah, it's a flat bonus of +2, then it goes up. But it's like, okay, well, you're always guaranteed to have that. And in playing Savage Worlds, I'm like, man, the wild die concept is fun because it does the same thing, whereas like that wild die may not do shit for you, right? It may not. And in looking at 5th edition, there's actually an option for something similar to this system of a proficiency die of like, hey, you don't get a flat bonus. It's roll the die, and all it is random raw luck. And so I'm like, well, fuck, no one uses that because everyone thinks it's stupid, but I don't think it's stupid. I actually like the concept that a game like Savage Worlds delivers, where it's like you can't count on anything except your raw ability, your character, and that's your bar. Everything else is just stupid luck, and that comes from just I model that on my personal experiences in life with just deployments and whatnot, how things go. And Hollywood tries to teach people that it's not like Hollywood. Shit goes sideways, and you don't know what's going to happen. I've seen a hand grenade take down helicopters. Just crazy shit where you're like, that's impossible. Like, no, it's possible because it's just random stupid statistics that get in the way of what you would expect, your expectations are, and then voila,
Yeah, there's like this one entry in Murphy's combat laws, no plant survives enemy contact. So basically you build your character, but you don't have any guarantees as soon as you step into the actual world. There's going to be shit that's going to happen in a good way. There's going to be shit that's going to happen in a bad way. And just I believe just from reading it, doing away with the flat modifiers and introducing a concept like the expertise die is going to model that a lot better. Because what I'm seeing is I'm a big fan of a web series called Critical Role, where a bunch of voice actors play D&D. And they've a while ago, last year, at the end of last year, they finished a long-running campaign, and they finished basically at level 20. And that came to the point where basically every roll they made was like, oh man, I really suck at this stat, so yeah, it's just a 22. And that just and now that they're playing new characters, it's like, oh man, oh cool, I can really do this because I'm really proficient in that stuff. Ooh, I rolled a 14.
Yeah.
So there's just this huge power gap between levels, and that is something that I really like about OS+R with the expertise die, because you just don't get that guarantee. You know that overall you are going to perform a lot better in your chosen field than somebody who doesn't have it, but it's not a guarantee. Shit will go wrong, which makes for the best stories.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, I mean, I've seen the wizards, sorry, man, random fantasy words. I've seen the mages completely fail shit where they should have. It's just like, oh, you know, people like Table like, what do you mean you failed to cast your fucking spell? I mean, now you're taking more damage and you didn't do shit for us, you know. But that's where like something like the Halfling comes into play, and that's one of the things we hope to get across in the book is that for everything that feels like it's unfair, you know, to the air quotes, it's not about unfair. It's about, again, what are you willing to do to be successful? So when the wizard, when when the mage fails, the mage goes to cast Arcane Strike and fails, and that sad look on their face when they realize I'm going to die, right? You got a halfling. Is it time to grant that favor and be like, hey, you should re-roll that? Oh, Myrmidon, I hate to do this to you, but yeah, your next roll for defense, because you're in the middle of a throng of a mob, I got to do this to you, buddy, because we need the mage up more than I need you to roll that defense roll well. Yeah. You know, and so those are the conversations we want to spark at the table of like, how far are you willing to go for things? And the initiative system is the representation of that. It should look familiar for some people because it was shit on. I shit on that when I first saw the concept because it was ridiculously complicated. I was like, why the fuck would you put something so cool out and then complicate it with like, well, roll this die, then that die, then this die, then that die. And I'm like, God damn it, man, that's so fucking stupid yet brilliant at the same time. If you just knocked it down to old school D&D, you used to only roll a D6, right? And old school D&D, you actually went in a very specific order. Mm-hmm. It would be missile, melee, right, and then the spellcasters went last. That's just how the initiative system was put out. Okay. It wasn't whichever side had the higher rolls. There was certain actions went first, and I'm like, your fucking answers are right there in the damn product that you are now chief editor for, and you're supposed to be leading. You should know shit about. So I jumped on it immediately, and I was really sweating not getting the book out in time before someone else realized that it's actually a genius initiative system and kind of just fucking sidelined us. But no one did. And it also is contentious because people just are like, well, I don't understand it. Like I've had a lot of people say, well, you don't explain how initiative works in the book. Like it literally covers 2 pages and it says right the fuck there in the last paragraph of initiative, lowest number goes first. I don't know what to tell people, but that is the biggest complaint. I'm like, I even went back and read it because I was like, oh shit, did I not put that? I'm like, no, it says it right in the book. Like, what the fuck are you doing? But yeah, just convincing everyone like, I like I said, I grew up hunting, I grew up shooting guns. I have guns now. I've got a bow, right? I've got multiple bows. I don't know if you can see it behind me. Probably no, my bear is somewhere like there she is. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Nice. So I still shoot. I know how fast archery is. I know how many arrows I can get out. I give videos to people of these crazy professional archers who are spitting out arrows with accuracy one after another in seconds. And so it's like, look, archery is fast. Melee needs to take some time to get you into the fight, to get you set. And it's not just about swinging a weapon. That's what everyone forgets. It's like No, man, you've got to adjust your shield, adjust your stance, look for the opening, get up in there. So that's taking a little more time. Casting spells, or you got to say the words and make the gestures and really get it out and target it. So it's a little bit faster than melee. And so, again, it goes into all the attributes count. Just the expertise counts. And now you're like, well, am I doing an action that I'm expertise with? No. Well, fuck, now it's just a raw D20 roll, and this really is going to hurt me. And then it's like, okay, well, cool, but you all have favor you can draw from, blah, ha, 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 feel free. Pull it, pull it and use it. Fucking hand me that token. Please, you got a halfling. Use the halfling. They're like they're a magic success machine. So there's these little things, and yeah, I don't know. Even with the I feel like I'm rambling, but it's like every little thing builds on something else in the system. Like dexterity doesn't affect your missile fire, which gamers hate. And I'm like, look, man, I'm not asking you to accept my truth because, the argument from the expertise opinion, but sometimes you have to accept an argument from someone who is more of an expert than you are. I shoot a bow. When I'm firing my bow, I've shot a bow since I was, Jesus Christ, about 10 years old, right? I was in an archery club, hunted with it. It's like when I shoot a bow, at no point am I doing fucking acrobatics. I'm not twirling arrows. I'm not doing anything. I am standing still, and it is a draw. I have both eyes open, and my natural point of aim, my perception, has to tell me in my brain. I have to calculate quickly how far out is the target. What is the wind like? Where am I aiming? What's the slope? Am I uphill or downhill shooting? Where am I going? That's all calculated quickly, and that in no way is dexterity. That's not agility. There's not a fucking piece of dexterity to that. That is all perception and wisdom, which is why we went that route. And you talk about pushback from gamers. Ooh, Jesus.
Yeah, I can imagine. That was actually a point where when I read through it, it was like, okay, range combat with it. What the fuck? That was like really that needle scratch on needle scratch mode. Like, wait a second.
Yeah, man. Again, everyone is so ingrained for 40 years of agility, dexterity. It must be the correct way of like.
Yeah, same
even when I
way
shoot
with Savage Worlds, shooting based on agility.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like that has nothing to do with it. I would much prefer it to be moved over to something different. And it takes away some of the complaints that agility is, overpowered in the game. Well, yeah, of course, because all the fucking good skills are dumped right into it with little to no thought about what really goes on with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry for the ramble, but it's just we start out with spell systems.
Are you kidding me? That's exactly the kind of shit I bring people on the show for. Because not only do I learn, you all learn who are watching this either right now or later on YouTube.
Yeah, I didn't do anything out of just craziness. I don't think. Some things may feel crazy, but I just wanted everything to matter in the game. I really did. I wanted everyone. I wanted that when you sit down and make a character in this game, that you immediately start off with, fuck, I got 6 bonuses to apply. One of them is a goddamn penalty automatically. Well, how am I going to do that? Well, what do I want to be? Well, fuck. Okay. Well, I'm going to assign my attributes. Well, I want to be, a ranger. Well, I don't know. Well, then a myrmidon. A myrmidon can use any weapon effectively, right? They have expertise with all weapons because we want to make them the pure fighter. Like, well, what about a ranger? Well, shit says here a ranger has certain weapons they use because it's weapons that make sense out in the wilderness, right? When you look at the ranger, it's not. Longsword isn't a fucking weapon that you get out in the woods with. That you don't. It's dumb. Giant knives, axes, bows, things like that, really helpful out in the wilderness. You're not going to stab a deer with a sword. You could. It'd be kind of epic. But, right? So, but yeah, that's what we want to do is if right from the get-go as you're going down. Even race choice. We've seen that where people are like, okay, well, I got these attributes. And they're like, well, what do the races do? And they go through and like, okay, cool, the dwarves do kind of a little bit different things. They're still a dwarf, but they do a little bit things different, and their hindrance or their disadvantage, drawback is a little bit different. And you look at the elves, you're like, oh, cool, that's kind of like some role-playing moments. Then the halfling and the Atani, and they're like, oh, shit, these are really cool. And then you go back to the human, and like, wait, what does a human do? Oh, I get that attribute increase, and I get an advancement right away. Oh, hell. Right now, shit. And then you start seeing wheels turn. And then when we introduced racist class, which I'm a huge fan of racist class, I don't. This is a long discussion I had. My editor does not get it. He did not grow up with the old school gaming, so he doesn't understand why someone. His example was like Klingons and whatnot, and Vulcans, because he's a Star Trek dude. And I was like, look, man, here's the deal. I said, reality is, when you sit at a gaming table and I ask you to describe a dwarf, almost every gamer is going to describe the same fucking character. Bearded, short, battle axe or warhammer, right? And it's like, all they're doing is describing a dwarven warrior, right? Regardless of what they want to do, they're all describing a dwarf as a warrior class because they all have an icon in their heads. The same for an elf. What does an elf do? Well, they're kind of sneaky. They're good with nature. They shoot a bow. It's like, oh, really? They got magic powers too? Yeah, shocking how almost everyone that describes an elf describes either a fucking mage of some kind or, a hybrid of warrior mage. And so that's where that all came into play. So now we added that in the mix, and people were just like, oh, why would you do this? And we have one guy who's playing an elf at racist class, and he liked the idea that he represented the perfect version of the elf. Because I tell him, I was like, look, man, the racist class represents the paradigm of you are better than everyone else, but they're still your brothers and sisters, but they've just lost their way because they've chosen to taint their blood and their souls by choosing to do things not elven. Like, ooh, I'm an elven myrmidon. Okay, great. I'm an elf. Yep. Like let that be your debate points. So, again, the whole system is just, it's this whole circular argument that should be happening inside someone's head of like, well, again, good luck min-maxing it. Good luck. I haven't seen it yet, and I've played with min-maxers and munchkins. One of them played a mage, one of them played a myrmidon. Yeah. First one played a mage, thought he had it all in hand. He rolled the first roll of the game. We went to him for Arcane Strike, and he died. Well, he began to engage with his death save. And then the Myrmidon, he thought he could beat the shit out of things, and then he also went down, lickety-split. Was having a hard time. He's like, shit. Like, yeah, shocking.
Yeah, that's one of the beauty of those more, I'm not going to call it simple, of those more compact systems like you did with OS+R, because the more options you put into something, that just is a breeding ground for ways to optimize certain character builds. If you keep it, well, in this case, if you keep it simple, if you keep it small and compact, you don't have those options. But if you do it right, like I believe it is done, you've done in OS+R, you still retain these broad approaches you can take to characters. You can actually play the character you want. You're not constrained by it. You're supported by it, even though it doesn't give you like 50 pages of spells and 20 pages of different subclasses for a subclass you've already chosen.
Exactly. No, thank you for your vote of confidence. At least we have one person who likes it.
Well, I haven't played it yet, but no, I'm just kidding.
No, that's true. That could vastly change. Like, oh my god.
What was I thinking? Oh god, I said that.
Yeah.
I said that on YouTube. No.
It's all right. You can make a video burning the book. It'll be fine.
Oh yeah, I got my confirmation that my print is in the mail.
Oh, cool. Nice.
Gonna get that about.
Yeah. It really is a good looking book. It's kind of surreal to hold something in my hands. I'm like, oh, fuck, man, I actually wrote this, and this is like a real thing. It's just crazy.
Yeah, I believe. So, one more point is something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. How do you balance encounters in OS+R? Because you have experience points, so you kind of have a kind of balance sheet, but your NPCs that you provide, they are not provided with, oh, use this for a 20 XP character or something. You just say they are trained, they are untrained, they are masters, I believe, something like that.
Yeah, they're untrained, trained, expert, elite, and legendary. And like if you look at the dragon, for instance, is a legendary creature, but the dragon has 12 hit points, D12 per hit points, right? Plus some extra. They don't have a lot, and that was that throws people for a loop. But I'm like, don't look at the hit points, because if you're doing that, you're fucking gaming wrong, because you look at what a dragon does. And like I told people, it's like if your dragon is caught on the ground, you have done the dragon injustice, because the dragon should be swooping in and just eviscerating everything around it when it does its flyby attacks. So how do you balance encounters? Yeah, I don't know. It goes back to, your table. I can't tell you like 5 untrained Tragul with 1 scout is a balanced encounter when you have 3 mages at your table, and that's all you have. I don't know. It's just impossible to me. It's impossible to capture that moment. I don't know what advancements they take, and I don't know what spells your people are choosing. I don't know what weapons your guys are using. I don't know if you have any warriors in the party. You might have a whole team of jacks, right? And so that creates a whole different complicated situation where you've now got black ops operators at a table who may not be interested in some of these things. But it really is and if it sounds like a cop out, I hope it doesn't. It's not. It's just I never want to tell someone, well, if you do these 4 monsters, it'll be a perfect balanced encounter. Because we all know there's no such thing as a balanced encounter. It's impossible. And even the games that do it, look at how many complaints there are on D&D. If you Google fucking 5th edition encounter balance is hot garbage as your usual autofill.
Yeah, I've played D&D 5, and I've GM'd D&D 5.
Sure.
With a homebrew world, and in the first 2 encounters I used the encounter calculator, and both times I almost wiped my group. I was like, okay, so much for the fucking easy encounters. Fuck this shit.
Yeah, exactly, right. And so for me, I was like, look, we're just going to create some hopefully cool monsters that have a little bit different approach, to things. Like our ooze, we have an ooze in the game, the Eldritch Viscid. Right. But it's like, great. I don't want it to be just a stupid green slime. Let it do something fun. And as a GM, you can look at a creature and be like, I want them to encounter this creature, or I want this to be my villain. Okay, cool. Do I need 1 or do I need a plethora? And that's really where it is. It's like, your team better, and you know what they're capable of. And some of it is going to be experimenting with it. Where I put out, and again, even I have put out encounters, even at like conventions. I had essentially, the table was usually about 2 to 3 warriors, a mage, and a jack, right? Five characters, and what could be considered like a really good mix. And I've had those groups go down in 1 round. In fact, the first game I ran at the first con, I thought was a really light encounter with some Tragul. And then I put a Great Blood in there to sort of mix it up, and I had to quickly pull some DM fiat out of my ass to save the first few rolls, because it went character fail, character fail, character fail, character fail, character fail, monster succeeding. It was like, oh shit, they're in trouble. Because if people don't know who are watching, there is no hit point bloat in OS+R as well. The hit points you start with are likely to be the hit points you stay with for your entire career as an adventurer. They don't go up by a level there are no levels, right? There's just, you gain experience and you can spend it on advancements. And if you don't choose to make yourself healthier, great, you have 4 hit points, mage.
Yeah,
you have different priorities, and so. And again, it's even with like, okay, well, we're running like 500 experienced characters. Okay, cool. I don't know what their hit points are. I don't know what their expertise are. I don't know how they've done life. So yeah, it's going to take a little bit of experimenting for folks, but I think once you get a feel for how the creatures operate, and even sometimes reading them through once, there's like, that seems kind of weak. And then you see it in action, you're like, ooh, like one of the comments we got from one of the DMs was, flying creatures aren't a joke in this game. I was like, yeah, you mean the whole move, destroy you, and then keep moving? Yeah. Almost like peregrine falcons and every other apex winged predator does. They don't land and go to combat with you. Not going to happen.
That would be a funny sight, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, and that is not a concept that is really all that new, because, for example, in Savage Worlds, you don't get ranks for your NPCs or something. You have to take a look at the entry and be like, okay, is it a wild card? Is it not a wild card? What are the stats? What are its monstrous abilities? And do my players have a chance, from my experience, to survive this? So
Yeah.
so it really isn't nothing new. It's just something that is not that common in D20 systems.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of neat because you look at your base Trag'Oul, just a regular old Trag'Oul, which Trag'Oul, for people listening, is my fancy way of having like Gnoll Goblin hybrid kind of thing in the game. We wanted something kind of cool, crazy that wasn't just orcs and goblins and all this nonsense. So we went with something a little different. But the base Trag'Oul has a D4 for their monster die, which means they have, up to 4 hit points and do up to 4 damage. And then there's no real variation in that. So if you take the average, that's 2 hit points all around.
Yeah.
So everyone can kill a Trag'Oul. A mage has a good chance of killing one with their measly D4 damage, whatever they choose. The jack, the warrior should definitely be able to kill a Trag'Oul. And so those are the key pieces that people should hone in on, is like, what is the monster die, and are the, how many are like elite creatures get an expertise dice on shit they do, which makes them incredibly dangerous when you start adding in that extra variable of things. But yeah, man, it's definitely not a common concept with people not being. It's I don't like hand holding. I don't do it in my chosen career. I don't handhold. My job is to mentor and to lead people. I've been doing it for 22 years now, and I'm in the senior ranks. And it's even how I engage my junior sailors or junior military personnel around me. Is I will take them, and I won't tell you how to do something, but I will walk you through a process of how it should be done by the rules, by the books, by the guidance. But I need you to be able to understand it and embrace it in your own way, because everyone learns differently. And so I prefer to go that route.
Yeah,
and it's just carried over into.
I understand that approach, because you don't want people to just go through the motions somebody hammered into them. You want them to understand how the process works so they can adapt to new situations. And that, as an approach, I can see is absolutely necessary for dear life in the military, and absolutely necessary for dear life in something like OS+R, because if you just always go with the same approach of go close, whack it with the stick, sooner or later somebody's gonna kick your ass.
Oh yeah. And then death isn't the end. We promise people that when you hit 0 hit points, you don't get all mopey and shit because your character's not dead. The death saves we wanted to do something different with, which we did. I was like, then the death saves, I wanted to keep you engaged at the table, because there's nothing worse than being the one sitting there being like, well, I'm dying, that's my turn. Now it's like, okay, cool, let's have a conversation between the two of us, and we're gonna do a little role play while everyone else is murder hoboing it. You and I are gonna role play in the middle of all this. And that will stop everything at the table. In my experience of the games I've run, is people actually want to sit and listen, like, oh, fuck, they're dying. What comes next? And then yes, it does rely a little bit on a creative GM. That I can never help with. It is what it is. You either can craft the stories or you can't. And it's not saying it's bad. You just, if your way out is like, hey, you are being tested against your strength. Roll, please. That's one way of doing it. That's just not my way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to keep it short because time is running out, you can just do a quick narration of how your god puts you in an arena and makes you prove your worth in something. Roll strength, please. Just give it a bit of framework, so the player has something in their theater of mind, and then they can make a roll, and it's just done in bam, like 8 to 10 seconds flat, done. Next guy. But they're still engaged with it, and they know the seriousness of it.
Absolutely. And everyone's keeping watch of those tick marks. We're like, oh, we got to get to the mage.
It's funny how it's always the mage in those examples.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah, because just the ones that go down and it's all their own doing. I swear, it's either the players I play with have the worst luck, but it's almost always them killing themselves by failing the rolls. It's just like, holy shit. And that's why I changed the favor the way I did. Originally, favor functioned like Benny's, where it was just like, you don't start with any. Well, so not like Benny's, but they functioned like Benny's, but you didn't start with any. You had to earn them. And then after a few disastrous playthroughs, I was like, oh, this game is kind of lethal. So you need to redesign a system where you actually get to start with some, or at least the opportunity to start. So that's what the final product is. Hey, there's this small well of fortune. So I'm watching. Go ahead and draw. Pull those pieces out as you want. I just need you to throw it over here to me when you decide that you had enough and you're tapping out. Again, all about choice. Not to control the characters or make them tap dance around things. Yeah. You want to talk about the dragon human thing?
Yeah, man. Overall, you don't give a lot of history or something of the world because, as you said, you wanted to work like a framework, put in their own stuff. And I was reading through it. I was finally realizing that I'm not going to get to read the history of a world and of races, which I like because I'm not a fan of having to read through 400 pages, of which maybe 120 are the system and everything else is history to put that into context. But then I got to the point where it's like, and everything was kind of cool, and then the humans and the dragons went to war and used magic and fucked everything up, and I was like, don't you fucking do this to me. No. You're going to tell me something else. You're going to tell me something. Fuck, the book is over. Nah!
Yeah, man. Yeah, we wanted to have. Again, I wanted to be. I'm a huge fan of Eberron. A lot of people who listen to me or read what I say know I love Eberron. I love the idea of a freshly devastating war because it really does change the landscape and the environment. Yeah, and so the humans and dragons, like, it'd be cool. Why don't dragons dominate as apex predators? Jurassic Park is a thing. If the Jurassic Park detonates and all the dinosaurs get loose, we are fucked. Because we are not the apex predators we believe we are. We can think and we're pretty smart, but a T-Rex is going to get your ass. Velociraptors are going to outrun you. Usain Bolt does not have a chance against a pack of velociraptors. So I wanted to capture that. I was like, why would the dragons not be, there's always the thing, like, there's dragons living in the mountains and under the oceans and they're hidden, but they don't come out and just wreak havoc. So why? I'm like, cool, what if the humans worship them as gods and came in with them as living totems, and they just decided, you know what, Atani, you've had enough time. Your shit is old and weak, and it's ours now. And then what if the humans realize, hey, we have access to some pretty cool technology and some magics now that we didn't have access to before. We freed these dwarven peoples, and they really seem to dig that they're free now, and they want to help out. What if we don't really need these dragons anymore, and we just hunted them? And turn on them. So that's where that all kind of came from, is like, how do you remove these apex predators into the mythological status where you can use them as monsters so they're not everywhere? But then how do you create it where it's creative and fun and like, oh, humans don't suck. They're not the dumb race. They're not the ones who don't do shit. Whereas like, oh, the elves, we're very haughty and graceful and we drink with our pinkies out, essentially elves goose step everywhere. And the dwarves, well, we're gruff and angry and we're greedy, and it's like, no, fuck all that. I want humans to be able to have a spotlight. We're like, oh, that's cute. While you all are busy, popping fingers out each other's assholes, we're murdering our gods to prove a point.
To prove just that we can.
Yeah, exactly. Be like, yeah, it's just kind of how we roll.
Yeah, that's a very basic human thing. So we always ask, okay, how do we do it? We don't even ask, should we do it? Just
right? Yeah.
How do we fucking get there?
Exactly.
Yeah, we kind of had enough. I'm gonna beat you to the top.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, it's really where it comes from. Is like, I just want to give humans this role playing moment. Like, all the races have something about it. Like, what do humans have role playing wise? Oh yeah, that whole because a lot of game fantasy games in general, like, humans are everywhere. Well, how come? Well, they breed faster. Okay, well, that's a stupid reason. What if they were marauders and reavers and they came to just take what everyone else had, and they're like, well, how are you gonna do it? Well, I've got this 60-foot lizard that breathes fire that says we're going to go ahead and do it, and we believe it because it's a living god. But yeah, that's it. You're not alone though, man. That's the biggest request I've had personal messages from is like, are you going to do a setting book? Yeah. Like, I don't know. My editor says, yeah, he votes yes, but I'm like, man, that's a much different undertaking.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I vote yes also, so now there's 2 votes for the yes. just in case you're keeping tabs on that.
We're keeping a tab balance.
But yeah, so, and any other things besides setting books you have either in the making or just stored away in the back of your head concerning might want to get to paper?
Yeah, so between the editor and I, we're talking about some adventures, and he has 3 adventures he's looking at. He's also, I think he's a professional, and so he's going through this massive year-long school program right now. That wraps up here pretty soon. He's delighted for that as well. But his 3 adventures, he has these 3 adventures, and essentially it's very clever takes where each adventure has a theme that draws on one of the letters in the title of the game. So one themed on an oubliette, one is on some sorcery, and one is on some what it means to be a reaver, and take that into accounting. And I was like, dude, that's fucking genius. Like, people are gonna love this. So there's that. I know I talked about possibly doing like oh shoot, what do they call it in Savage Worlds? A plot point.
Yep.
Campaign of looking at doing that. But yeah, I gotta lay the bare bones out of that, and just again, I don't like telling people how to do things, and so it's just like, fuck, I feel like I'm violating my personal ethos where I'm like, well, here's the steps that you should go in. I know I can do it randomly and be like, all right, cool, if you want to use a quantum ogre, just go ahead, I don't really give a shit. Put it around how you want. So I'm trying to figure that out. And then I do have a couple more classes sort of coming into play. We've been looking at. The first one is a new discipline for the warrior. Mm-hmm. And I'll pull my notes up real fast. I should have done this. Should have done this. Sorry, where is it? Advanced classes. So there's one for the warrior, and then we actually have one kind of for the jack and one kind of for the adept, which both of those feel like it's like a violation of principle, but I'm like, but it's so discussed even today, right? We discussed and like maybe we could do something where it's like, and mostly these are ego projects, is like my version of what a bard is definitely not what D&D has presented. I don't give a shit about the fucking singing and dancing bullshit minstrel that nobody would want on an adventure. My bards are more in line with like Dark Sun and Dragon Age, where you're a fucking spy and everyone kind of knows it, but everyone accepts it because it's just how the world works, and someone has to do it and has to be there. So we're molding them to be like covert operators. Mm-hmm. For the warrior, the discipline, it's a rune blade, and it brings some of that mage power into very limited power into the warrior discipline by allowing them to play something that again allows you to make choices in life. How do you want to do this? Because it's going to take some hit points to this shit. You're not going to get off easy. But yeah, the rune blade is pretty much ready. I just need to push that out, and it'll be free. It's not like we're going to charge anything for these. Cool. But yeah, those are the OS+R specific things that I've been working on.
Nice. And for everybody who does not know, OS+R is published under the Open Game license. So if you want to create stuff for it, you just go right ahead.
Yeah, please, by all means, take it and make it better. I welcome it. It's not even a challenge. I'm just saying. I'm sure there are thousands of great ideas out there of how to twist this around and make it even more fun. Yeah.
The history seeds and plot hooks and everything you gave throughout the book, that's probably enough to inspire at least 3 campaigns. Because there's just so much of that in it. That's some really good stuff in it. So now that you're basically done with OS+R, as I understand it, any plans on going back to that Savage Worlds project you mentioned in the beginning?
Yeah, so we published the one. Well, so I designed it, and then Eric and oh my god, I completely more. They helped out get it because it's published through them. So I'm working on now what I'm calling the Into Babylon, which is, I was going to do it as a setting, but it doesn't make sense as a setting. So it's going to be, some people may have read it, it's going to be a Savage Worlds adventure. And I'm going to try to, now that I'm an actual RPG designer, I'm hoping I can have a little bit of like, hey, I'm not fucking around, Peg.
Yeah.
I produce results. But it's not really post-apocalyptic, but if the description is that there's something going on in Baltimore around 2018, 2019, where they're digging and trying to do construction. They discover something, and then within like weeks, these giant ass walls go up, and then military cargo transports begin arriving from various countries in the world. And transports go in, and some of those transports don't come out of the inner harbor area of Baltimore. And then at the same time that's happening, the all the people on death row or serving life sentences for violent crimes are transported from prisons in the U.S. and taken and dropped into Baltimore, into the middle of what these walled sections are now. And there's no explanation from the government. The only explanation the government ever gives is that when it all started happening, they sent first responders went in because of the nature of the disaster. Mm. Those first responders, most of them did not make it out alive. And so they sent a tier 1 operator team in to figure this out. And the only thing people know is the hackers on the net know that video broadcast was being done live via classified satellites. No one, they're not going to break it. They don't know what it is, but they know that the government was actively monitoring the team's engagement while inside the walls of the federal prison complex that they've created. But they vanished. The tier 1 operators never came back. And that was after that feed died was shortly when there was a secret meeting of the UN Security Council, and then all these military transports started pouring into the area rolling in. Yeah, and so it's a very cool twist. It's a very fun thing. Again, with me, I don't know why it is. It's a very, very fucking dark setting, and it's got it asks some hard questions of people again. And a kind of a theme I'm on is like, what will you do to survive? What are you willing to do to push ahead, to continue living? How precious is life for you and other people's lives? And so that's the route we go. And it's a few years after that little apocalypse in Baltimore where the government is happy, like, what? We got walls. We're pouring these people in from all over the world. No one knows what we're doing. We don't have to explain ourselves because we're not gonna. Mm. The rest of the world governments are like, yeah, no, the American thing that's happening, yeah, that's cool. We're good with that too. All of our problems are, because as this is happening, there's just like, oh, okay, cool. The prisons are not as full as they used to be around the world. Yeah. Is a thing. Yeah. So, but it's what's going on inside is the real dark secret of what's happening. So I'm doing that for Savage Worlds. That'll probably be next, and then I want to explore the nature of brotherhood, but not just boys. The nature of fellowship and brotherhood from military veterans' perspective and the effects of PTSD can have on people. Mm-hmm. I think you probably read it where I want to do the one where it's a Powered by the Apocalypse about a motorcycle gang, a 1%er gang that's comprised only of military vets from the modern era who feel displaced, sort of like they did after Vietnam, where we come back and no one really comprehends the things that we've seen forward. And so what binds us, and again, where are we willing to go with this in order to maintain family? So yeah, those two will probably be the first things that I really pump out.
Cool. That's going to be interesting. That's something I'm definitely going to follow up.
I hope it's interesting. And
oh well, you're going to see if I find it interesting if and when you get the invitations to come back and talk about those projects on Veiled Fury.
There you go. If it doesn't come, I'll know. I'll be like, wow, these are stupid.
Yeah, because I am the be all and end all when it comes on RPG projects.
No, man, it is what it is. It is what it is. Everyone's truth is their truth, so.
Oh man. Okay, so that takes care of that small little list. We ran a bit over, but I don't fucking
Sorry.
care because no, don't you fucking dare to apologize. This was absolutely amazing, very enlightening, and super funny. So yeah, thank you, Scott, for being here to talk about OS+R. And everyone else, thank you so much for watching. You're going to find links to everything I mentioned and to DTRPG, where you can buy OS+R, below this video as soon as it goes up, which is probably going to has already happened if you're watching it on YouTube. Man, streaming stuff, it's like Star Trek episodes with time travel. It fucks with your mind.
So, exactly.
Anyways, thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Awesome. Thanks.